Hey, kia ora everybody. Welcome to Doc Edge Schools. This is the final week of the Doc Edge 15th Annual Documentary Film Festival. And just as Doc Edge Schools kicked it all off, we will be finishing on the 3rd. So if you haven't booked in yet, email for more films. You might be here just for the one film, which is The Forum today, but we will make these films available whenever suits your teaching schedule and whenever you want to watch them and preview them. So if you would like to book in a class, just let me know which titles and which times you'd like to watch. Email me on matthew@docedge.nz. But for the moment, we are lucky to be being joined. Hopefully, people come and go through this world of tech and all. It's been so crazy with COVID and how we've had to transition this from live theatres to online in such a small period of time. But here we are. We have Auckland Uni Psychology Department, Michelle Bursell and a few of her students. We have the South Seas Film and Television School. I believe Sasha can't make it today, but if there are any South Seas people out there, welcome, welcome. And Evans Bay Intermediate with Vikas Svanpol. I believe I may have mispronounced that, but welcome anyway. If you have any questions that pop up during the film, um, feel free to either write them down or type them into the chat box here because we'll be monitoring that. And if you're super brave, we'll bring you up on stage as well by the magic of technology, where if you push this button, which has speak under it, that will take you through kind of like a TARDIS-like wormhole, and you'll appear on camera with us here, and you and your students can ask us questions directly because we're lucky enough to have Mike Smith, who is an environmental campaigner at an international level. He is addressing the issue of climate change, as does Greta Thunberg in the film we're about to watch, and we're interested from a local perspective when international forces are being brought to bear on how we live our lives. So that will be great. We'll have Mike Smith afterwards. Ahead of all of that, though, I would like to thank the Ray Foundation who make the Doc Edge Schools possible. Thank you very much, Reiko, Shizuka, Simon, and Kai. It's been a wild ride, but I think we've kept all of the cargo on the train, so to speak. Um, some of the corners have been a little bit interesting to take, but massive thanks to Ray Foundation and to the Doc Edge team, especially here, Alicia Adar, who has been a solid foundation of Doc Edge Schools 2020 in the digital era. Okay, so Alicia, what did you think of the film, and are there any kind of techie things that I'm forgetting?
Yeah, I thought the film was really fascinating because I actually had no idea about the World Economic Forum before watching it. So, yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about social entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurship, um, but also I love it behind the scenes. I like feeling like I'm getting some inside goss on certain things. So, yeah, that was quite cool. A lot of things concern me. For example, what you'll see in the film is that a lot of big decision makers are sitting around a table having dinner, and the idea that people are making big decisions that affect us over a dinner table, a private dinner table, is quite concerning. Um, so, yeah, I found it to be a fascinating film. It's one of my favorites of the festival, actually. Um, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Like the in previous years, all of those large international economic meetings, World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Economic Forum, they've all got a financial focus in mind, but all of those decisions, like you say, which are taken undemocratically, um, affect environment, affect working people, affect um, Indigenous people, affect everything around the world. So, what I liked about this film is it showed that there is movement to include those voices perhaps too little too late, given the current climate crisis we're in, and given that history has shown that there's a lot more talk and a lot less walk that takes
Yeah.
place at these kinds of things, and that's why we're looking forward to having Mike speak to some of those issues afterwards.
Yeah.
In the meantime, though, where are we? We're 5 minutes in, so the tech element is that hopefully you've all signed up. Hopefully you've gone through the invitation email, click the black create new account button, and if you haven't, Alicia's put our email addresses there, and we'll walk you through the process if you haven't done that yet. So go to the link that Alicia has posted in the chat here, schools.docedge.nz, film, the forum. Give that a good old click. Now, it's important to note to keep this webinar jam window open. We're going to close the mics, we're going to close the cameras, but you'll hear us when the credits start rolling to come back in, and we'll have the question and answer session then. For now, though, so if you hover your cursor over the play now button, any last thoughts, any last requests before I push anything? Push go?
No, I think we've got all the info.
All right, we're
It's a
good to
great
go.
film. Maybe just write notes while you're watching the film, so
Yeah,
you don't forget.
absolutely. I support that because it's a long one and there's a lot of information and quite a few different threads of ideas going on here. So write some notes as you go. Refer to our education kit, which is downloadable from the film page. And after that, we'll get together and we'll have a talk about it. Nice. All right. Well, thanks again, Ray Foundation. Let's hover our cursors over the Play Now button underneath the title, The Forum. And when I say go, we'll push play together. 3, 2, 1, go. And then it'll ask you to push play again on the main page, and we'll see you back for the credits afterwards. Right, enjoy the show. Okay, kia ora everybody. Hope you enjoyed the forum, or Das Forum as it is known in the German version. Hey Lisa, welcome back.
Hi.
Cool. So if we have teachers and students in the audience, feel free to type in your questions in the comment box. And if Mike is in the audience, if you tap this icon, which has speak underneath it, we'll get you up on stage and we'll have a little bit of a kōrero about what we've just seen. However, coming back after that, I'd like to say Hari Hurito, Hari Ngā whānau to you, Alicia. Happy birthday. It's been a long ride from the beginning of the year, and here we are in the last week of Docedge School. So happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
What are your I'm not going to ask what are all of your plans, but we hope you're going to have a nice little dinner or a drink or something later tonight. Have you got anything special going on?
Just being a low key. A lot of my loved ones don't live where I live, so it's going to be a low key one, and I think it's going to be spread out over a few weeks, to be honest. Just bits and bobs here and there, letting people catch up because we're all busy people.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, I like a good birthday month because different types of people in your life and different things going on. It's good to I like a small intimate group, many small intimate groups rather than one big party.
Oh, definitely.
But I want to personally thank you and say thank you very much for all of the hard work. It's been a difficult time, and you've done extraordinarily well to help make Docedge Schools a success this year. So thank you.
Thank you.
And it looks like we've got Mike in the room. Got it, Mike.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou.
Right, we're going to get you to push your camera button so we can see you as well as that little blue icon next to the mic button. There you are. Tēnā koe, kei te pēhā.
Ora tono ana, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
Cool. So some big issues there in the movie. Like what are the real standouts to you? Let me give the students a little bit of a background here. Mike has been campaigning on an international level for addressing climate change at a governmental level, but also direct action as well. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I guess we've been working at a number of levels, both in action on the ground. Um, I was one of the leads on the deep sea oil drilling fossil fuel campaign, which resulted in the government banning any future deep sea oil exploration in Aotearoa in our marine area. So it's at that level, which is very granular, very local organisation campaigns. Campaign went for about 10 years, ended successfully with a ban, through to the macro level, which is working at an international level, as you said, engaging both with governments and also climate activism on the ground, working with groups in other countries, trying to join our campaigns so that we can have a maximum effect, on the problem.
I mean, that must be really heartening because, I mean, in my experience of being on the periphery of social activism is that it's hard to get a win. Often you feel like you're kind of standing on the sideline holding a placard and they just steamroll. So yeah, congratulations for actually affecting change. What would you say would be the best strategies for actually affecting change rather than just kind of shouting into the wind?
Well, it sort of depends on the political climate of the day. And when we started our campaign, we had the John Key-led national government in. Simon Bridges was the Minister of Energy. They were deeply committed to the policy of fossil fuels and expanding that industry in Aotearoa. And so lobbying them politically, marching up to Parliament with a sign saying, please don't do it, wasn't going to cut it. They were committed to doing it. So we considered it a waste of energy to be attempting to change the politicians' minds, National Party at that time. So we just decided to take the companies on head on and just remove the social license that they rely upon. They rely upon not just the political patronage, but they also rely upon New Zealanders agreeing that that type of activity is something that we want. And so, that was about mobilizing masses of people. That was about targeting directly the companies. The strategies that we used were cost and delay. The more we could delay them, the more expensive it would become for them. The more that we could erode their social license, the more uncomfortable it got to them. The more that we could threaten the shareholders, by saying, well, your investments are not safe here. We're going to stop you. So they were spending $1 million a day to maintain the oil rigs. And that's a lot of money with no return. They're putting all that money out into the operation, but there's no return until they discover oil. So the costs are stacking up. So the longer we can delay that, the more expensive it is. And then we're saying to the shareholders, your investments are not safe here in Aotearoa. We will throw you out eventually. And you would have squandered millions and millions and millions of dollars for nothing. So, you should just be sensible and pack up and go home. So it was about being tactical. It was about assessing what's the environment, what's the political environment. And so obviously when the Labour government came in, they were more sympathetic. They'd already seen a huge uprising over the foreshore and seabed, which was the beginning of this issue for us. The government only denied Māori the access to the foreshore and seabed because they wanted to hock it off to foreign interests. And we were potentially in the way of that, so they made sure that we weren't. And so this was a continuation of that struggle. And of course, we mobilised so many people in 2004, with the foreshore and seabed hikoi, that it basically, the Helen Clark government, Labour government, lost all the Māori seats, and they ended up being in opposition for 9 years. So when they got back into power, the spectre of upsetting us again and having a mobilisation at that scale and the political cost of that meant that they had to do their sums and say, well, look, we better listen to what we're being told this time. So when the Labour government first got in, the Māori caucus called me down to a meeting and they said, well, what do you people want? And we said, well, we want an end to we want climate change action, and that means an end to fossil fuel extraction. And so they said, okay, we'll give that to you.
Cool.
And so, yeah, so it's about, but the politics had to be right. There had to be enough social pressure. So we were mobilising through that decade, and tens of thousands of New Zealanders were coming out not just Māori, but lots of people right across the spectrum were part of that mobilisation. And so it's just relentless pressure. And so that took 10 years. So I guess durability, you got to be able to stick at it,
Yeah.
And not give up and just keep going. It's another factor.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the Labour Party and the National Party in this situation. And there's, from Helen Clark to John Key, it seems like they present themselves as polar opposites, but really, if there's if the same issues are coming up under both governments, there's something missing in that conversation. And you rightly draw attention to the fact that there's unresolved land use and land ownership issues, particularly in the foreshore and seabed conversation that was brought to the fore. So, what role do you think that Māori and Pacifica people can play in really countering the decisions that are made at these international economic fora like World Bank and World Trade Organization? What do you think it's worth them getting involved in the process at those high levels?
Yeah, well, definitely. What
defending the whenua at a local level.
Yes, definitely. And I suppose one of the some of the language around climate, the climate issue is climate justice, and that basically talks about the fact that there's many communities that have done the least to cause the problem who suffer the greatest harm, and so Pacific nations are a pretty graphic example of that. The people of the Pacific Islands have probably produced the least global emissions out of any nation in the world, yet they're the ones that are going to be on the front line of sea level rise. Well, not going to be, they are. And so we've got to be, any climate movement has got to be very mindful of that. And so there's that. But also I think that within a cultural dynamic, Māori, Pacific Island, other Indigenous peoples have a matrix of understanding that nature is the supreme law. If you look at most Indigenous peoples around the world, they have belief systems that puts nature at the highest level of fundamental level of principles, values, and law. So it's the law of nature at the top. Down from there, you have the law of people, which must observe and be consistent with the law of nature. And then both those two things combined drive the economy, or the access to resources, or how you use resources. And so it's nature first, human second, and then underneath that, what we do. And that's the way that laws are made. Now, in the Western consumer world, which is only a relatively new thing, it's only been around since the Industrial Revolution, basically, it's a couple hundred years, they've flipped that on its head. And so the economy is number one, and the economic interests drive the human or the political organizational levels. And I'm not too sure what they've done with the sacredness. The sacredness has kind of kicked out the door, the separation of church and state, maybe the institutionalization of spirituality, and that it's parked up in a little white church and put on a hill and you go visit on Sunday. But it's not part of your day-to-day activities. You don't walk with your gods every moment of the day. And those things influence what it is that you do. When I say gods, I don't mean that figure, literally. But I mean, you don't walk with the manifestations of sacredness of nature. And so I think that's something that Māori communities and Pacific Island communities, in their traditional sense, that's what they reflect. That's the way society is ordered. And that's why it's really important that for Māori people are going through this period of rediscovery and recovery, and, having had those kinds of understandings knocked out of us, through out the language, denigrating culture, telling us we're stupid and we ought to just get with the program, which is going to be good for us, and we're going to become civilized and we're going to destroy the earth in 100 years. Well, we're starting to realize, well, hang on a minute, that's not actually working out too good for us. It's not working too good. It's not working out for anybody, really. And so the people, you got to ask, where you got to follow the money. Who's it working out for? And so where's that thinking sort of, where can you see the benefits of all of that accruing? And it's just in the smaller and smaller contracting group of wealthy people who end up controlling everything, the power, the governments, the power, the military, the resources, the money, and that's just a contracting group of people. So it works out good for them, but it doesn't work out for the majority of people, and that's a broken system. A system that only looks after, the 1%, if you like, is a broken system. And so we need to make sure that when we're rebuilding our society and we're looking at alternatives, that we don't replicate that and just create a new 1%, but we've got to look at how do we empower and how do we shift the fundamental thinking, the framework. So, is wealth the great goal of everything, or is it a healthy space in which to bring up our families and our children? Is it individual control of money the goal, or is it everybody having enough to eat and a dry and warm and safe place to raise their families? And so that's where. And so I think Polynesian peoples and indigenous peoples, and everybody's indigenous to somewhere. I'm sure the ancient Celtic people, the Scots, the Welsh, the Irish, they all knew this when they lived in villages. They wouldn't have tolerated one person living down the corner who had everything and the rest of the people were starving. Well, if that did occur, and it did historically, well, then there'd be revolutions and people would rise up and correct that. And so I think that we just need to be correcting that right now.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that you've drawn attention to this, the three-tier ideology and how the pyramid is, upside down. Well, it would, at the moment we've got 1% at the top and everybody else down the bottom. But if you're looking at a three-tier system which has our natural connection as the paramount idea, then that's a much healthier way to live. And I've seen, because there's been such a strong environmental movement because of the problematic behavior of having economy first, that they came up with something called the triple bottom line, which was exactly that. It was like, oh, let's actually start factoring in the environment, but it's number three, and that is the triple bottom line is the environmental cost. But it's still an inverted system where we're putting our lifeline last. The self-care is not there. So I think that's an important issue to actually present to people who are in charge of economies and societies and governments, as well as these economic institutions. Before we continue, I'm just going to throw out there to the teachers and the students, if you have any questions for Mike or want to add to the conversation here, you can type into the chat box or press that speak button, and we'll come back and bring you up on stage. So what else about the movie there, Mike? The taxation seemed to be like, there was an interesting moment where one of the speakers was saying, like, we're at a firefighter conference and we're not allowed to talk about water. He seemed to think that taxes were the answer. Where do your whakaaro, where do your ideas fall on that issue?
Yeah, well, I guess the redistribution of wealth has got to be an issue. And so whether or not that's in the form of taxation, I mean, I'm not an economist or anything like that, but I guess that boils down to the redistribution of wealth, and that definitely does need to occur. In terms of the mechanisms of that, I'm sure there's brighter people in the room that might be able to have some of the formulas that make that work. Interestingly enough, I was approached, but what we can say is that finance is one of the levers for change. We can design, new ways of doing things. We can decide that we need to relocate villages away from the coast. We need to shift technology, but it's going to take a certain amount of resource in order to do that. So we've got to, access large chunks of money and shift those across in order to do things. And I think, taxation is one of the mechanisms to do that. Investment's another one too. Although, I'd say it'd be social investment as opposed to sort of capitalist investment.
Well, I mean, I'd really like to. Alicia and I have been having some great conversations with a Maori cryptocurrency expert who is talking about, the future of reorganizing our financial systems, and how it's more transparent, and how that there's direct transaction for particular ideas and for particular projects. So you're welcome to have a look through that and see if there might be any resonance there for possible reorganisation of Māori economy, but also New Zealand economy and international economy. It might be worth further conversation there.
Definitely, I'll be keen to see that.
Awesome. And I realise I'm a white guy here, just chatting away with you, Alicia. Have you got any commentary on the movie or thoughts that you want to talk about with Mike here?
Well, I definitely think that Indigenous people hold a lot of the information on how change can happen, and that even comes from another film that we have, Rise. How we could tell that through what they were saying. I'm just going to move my camera.
How do I might yet?
In the background. In Rise, how it just kind of was a whole different ball game for the Pacifica students who were already being affected by their homelands and the waters rising. So yeah, I definitely agree that like a lot of Indigenous people hold the keys or were potentially pre-colonization living in a way that would be more sustainable. I don't know how to change the way that everyone lives their lives currently, but I'd like to know, Mike, what you think about what individuals can do to kind of contribute to climate action.
Well, one thing I'd suggest, when we're talking about Indigenous, systems and people and the oppression of Indigenous peoples and the Black Lives Matters and all that that's happening at the moment, which is really, really good. But I'm left wondering, how does that empower our Pākehā cousins as well, or are they left feeling kind of powerless or marginalised or even worse, paralysed? Not feeling like we better just keep our heads down and not say anything in case we're blamed for something, or that we just attract a lot of negative attention. So I'd say that one of the things we've got to make sure that we don't do is disempower ourselves. So while understanding the past is good, and looking at other systems and other models that peoples from around the world that have developed, and as I said before, if you look back in history, just about every culture, every ethnic group in the world has had a period in its life where it's lived closer to nature and in a less exploitative way. It's only in the last 200 years that things have really gone really crazy. So by all means, feel proud about the fact that you come from a heritage like that. All of us do, and reach back into that as a source of pride and hold on to that and go, we used to be like that. Our ancestors were like that. They were kind of pretty cool. They lived close to nature. But then don't get stuck, look to the future. Look to the future and do a lot of visioning exercises. Just sit around with your family, your friends, and say, well, what would the world look like if we could shape it? Because it is in your hands, you must get sick of hearing that. But the world is in your hands as the coming generation. And you need to be able to design and build a world that's fit for purpose. And it's really important that you as young people have your hands on the tools and to design and build it, because you won't get it right from the start, and as it goes wrong, you need to be able to fix it. And if you don't know how it was built, or if you hadn't had a part in it, you won't know how to fix it. So you really do need to engage in that process. So don't get stuck. I would be my advice. In terms of your question, though, is about individual action. Well, I'd say, sure, there's a lot of things that you can do, like plant-free diet. Try to get away from eating too much meat. You don't have to go right away from it, but try and eat less. Walk, catch public transport, get away from driving around in cars too much. Change the light bulbs. There's all those kind of cliches that people can do, but it's collective action that is the real. Yeah. That's the thing that's really going to make the difference. So while you can take personal action, get together in groups, because you're going to be more powerful in groups. You're going to have lots more ideas to circulate around. You're going to be able to do more. If 50 of you decide you're going to remove a mountain, you'll get it done. Whereas one person standing there with a spade, it's probably just going to go, look, this is way too big for me, and you can't do anything about it. But so really engage and become collective. Really good things that can happen are like food cooperatives. Start a food cooperative, and so you're not having to shop at Pack and Slave or any of these other kinds of big conglomerates. Don't want to pick on them unnecessarily, but and you can support local farmers markets and buy stuff in bulk, so that you haven't got a lot of food miles. You haven't got trucks rolling up and down the place, transporting food and adding costs. So there's lots of things that people can do collectively. So I'd say, sure, do the things you can do as individuals, but really band together as little tribes. Make new tribes, Ngāti Pākehā tribes. Give yourself cool names and form little tribes, and I reckon that's the way to go.
Yeah. Okay, well we've got about 5 minutes left. Were there any other things from the movie that particularly struck you, Mike? Like there seemed to be a bit of social entrepreneurship. There seemed to be like some good things happening in small ways. You were talking about looking to the future and looking to, not getting stuck. Do you have any ideas about perhaps future tech or future social reorganization about how we might tackle some of these big problems really quickly?
Well, AI, artificial intelligence is just around the corner, and it's going to change the world in ways that we can't even imagine at the moment. And I guess I'm hoping that that might deliver some kind of formula, some sort of technology that might help us out. There's a potentiality that it does. We've just got to make sure that it isn't AI isn't monetarized or militarized, because if it's captured by those forces in society, mainly driven by wealth, people seeking wealth, that they will be used against us and against human populations. But there's a lot of potential there, and we're not too sure what the future is going to look like in regards to artificial intelligence. But it's coming really fast, and it's coming soon. So that's one thing. But then I wouldn't base it all on technology. I'd also say you need to maintain the level of skill maybe that our grandparents had, or great grandparents, whom knew how to grow gardens and prune fruit trees and look after chooks when they get sick, and to have that basic level of practical skills, I think is something that and don't rely upon technology 100%, and just rely on maybe some of the older skills and things. One of the things I'm wanting to do over this coming year is have a talk to the government about releasing land for starting collective eco communities. This is something that was done by the Labor government under Norman Kirk back in 1972, which must seem like 1,000 years ago to most of the young people. But they actually freed up like big hunks of land, 50, 200 acres of land, and they said, go for it. Just go on there and build yourself some houses and see what you can do. Experiment in building new communities and living closer to the land. And these things, they lasted, I think the longest lasting one lasted right up into 2000. But the problem was the government gave them land that was isolated as. It was in the middle of the Whanganui State forest, and you had to cross the Whanganui River by swimming across it and then walk for 5 hours to get to it, which kind of just added layers and layers of complication to it. But I think that there's, I'd certainly like to see that opportunity, because for a lot of people, getting houses, owning land, just having the basic things that you need to build alternative communities is just out of reach, and it all comes back down to land. And so if we can carve out chunks of land that isn't being used at the moment, and let communities have a go at experimenting on new ways of living, that's what I'd like to see happen.
Okay, well, I mean, that seems like a pretty clear message of land management. Land does seem to be a fundamental issue here, and also reorganizing our attitudes with that, flipping those top three priorities. And I think from there, then globally and locally, we can all start to live a healthier lifestyle with a better attitude towards the world and to people and to nature. So thank you, Mike. Tēnei te mihi nui ki a koe mō te tautoko mai o tēnei hōtaka me kia mātou o Doc Edge hoki. Yeah, really want to thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your knowledge and how we move things forward for a new generation.
Kura, tino hare ko ana hau te nākau ko taimai nei anō kei wāngini o koutou. Koutou ngā rangatira I whakahaerenga tēnei o enei kōrero. Ngā mihi hoki atu ki a koutou katoa I te wā o Puanga, Matariki, nō reira, ngā mihi o te tauhou. Tēnā koutou.
Ngā mihi o te tauhou ki a koe hoki aho. Would also like to thank Ray Foundation for making this entire program possible. I hope we're doing you proud. And also to Alicia, whose birthday it is.
Hey.
Happy birthday, Alicia.
Thank you.
And I think that's our final forum for this session, Mike. But we'll send you some links to the other movies of interest to you, and we'll continue to court it all later in the year. Cool, but that's it. Teachers, students, if you have any more questions, send them through to the Alicia or Matthew email addresses here, and we will fix you up. But for the moment, everyone have a great afternoon. Looking forward to more of this mahi in the future. Thank you to everybody.